In the middle of a major conflict, the loudest signal isn't always an explosion. Sometimes it's the sudden, almost deafening silence. Today, we're going to decode a 15-day pause in a military campaign to figure out what that quiet really means.
So, picture this. For 2 solid weeks, the strikes are just relentless. And then, on day 15, the skies go completely silent. No bombs, no missiles, nothing. The big question is, why? Is this a step towards peace, or is it just the calm before a much bigger storm?
To figure out why everything went quiet, we first have to really understand the noise that came right before it.
Just try to imagine the constant tension of a major military campaign, and then it just stops. For military analysts, this abrupt halt wasn't just a break in the action, it was a signal, a strategic puzzle that they absolutely had to solve, and fast.
Okay, so let's get our bearings. What was actually happening on the ground when the strikes stopped? Let's dive into the specifics.
What you're looking at here is basically a classic standoff. You've got the U.S., whose main goal is to keep international shipping safe. You have Israel totally committed to taking out missile threats. And then there's Iran, drawing this hard red line, saying, don't you dare touch our economic infrastructure. These conflicting goals create an incredibly tense and fragile situation.
And the big event looming over this whole pause is the strike on Kharg Island. Now, it hit military targets, not the oil facilities themselves, but the message was crystal clear. Iran's economic lifeline is vulnerable. This was a huge escalation right before everything went silent.
And this is why everyone is so hyper-focused on the water. A full 20%, 1/5 of the entire world's seaborne oil squeezes through the Strait of Hormuz. So any disruption here doesn't just affect the countries in the fight, it sends massive shockwaves through the global economy. This is what we call the strategic center of gravity.
So here's the crucial point. This quiet period isn't necessarily peace. In military speak, this is what's known as an operational pause. And trust me, it is anything but a moment of rest.
Right. If they're not launching strikes, what in the world are they doing? Well, this is where the real nitty-gritty work of a modern military campaign happens, far away from the cameras.
Okay, the number one reason for a pause like this is something called Battle Damage Assessment, or BDA. It's basically checking your homework. Before you even think about your next move, you have to be 100% certain your last move actually worked. So they're poring over satellite photos and all kinds of intel to see what they hit and, just as importantly, what they missed.
And this slide shows you exactly why the whole pace slows down. After 2 weeks, all the easy targets are probably gone. Now you get into this really complex cycle. You got to identify harder targets, you have to double and triple check the intel, plan these intricate strikes, and then assign the perfect aircraft and weapons for the job. The war shifts from being about quick reflexes to being about chess.
And beyond all the data, there's the simple human and mechanical stuff. Pilots desperately need rest, and these incredibly advanced aircraft need a ton of maintenance. But the pause could also be purely strategic, a deliberate timeout to see how Iran reacts to that Kharg strike, or maybe even to open a quiet back channel for some diplomacy.
This all leads us to a really critical insight. This pause might not just be a reset. It could actually be the transition to a whole new stage of the conflict, what analysts call Phase 3. And this comparison just lays out the strategic shift perfectly. In the early phase, you're targeting the enemy's sword and shield, their air defenses and missile sites. But in Phase 3, you start going after their ability to even stay in the fight, their supply lines, their naval bases, their entire transportation network.
So analysts are glued to their screens, looking for these specific signs. Are surveillance drones staying up in the air longer? Are they starting to hit those small boat bases used for harassment? Is the public messaging getting more intense and coordinated? These are the clues that tell you the conflict isn't ending. It's actually getting much, much broader.
All right, so based on all this analysis, what should we be looking for in the next 24 to 48 hours to see where this is all going? So what are the signposts? The analysis really boils it down to 3 specific developments that are going to tell us exactly where this conflict is headed next.
First, do we see a formal mission to escort oil tankers? That would be a huge deal. Second, how does Iran respond? Do they lash out and attack shipping or energy facilities? And third, and this is the big one, does the coalition cross that red line and start hitting Iran's economic infrastructure directly? The answers to those questions will define everything that comes next.
In this quote right here, this is really the key takeaway. A pause in the action isn't a sign of weakness or confusion. In the cold, hard logic of modern warfare, it's often a sign of careful, deliberate planning, for a brand new and probably more complex stage of the fight.
Which leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. In a conflict like this, packed with high-tech surveillance and deep strategy, maybe the most important signals aren't the loud explosions at all, but the quiet moments that fall in between. What do you think?